life. But we defend them and they send them back. But as I told you, they threw to the demonstrators more rocks for the against the demonstrators.
Okay, well, there for the moment, Mr. Sudan, thanks for joining us from Alexandria. Let's go back to one of our other correspondents at another vantage point very close to Tahrir Square, who's been following events. It was very violent where you were, what, about half an hour ago? I presume it's still the same.
Yeah, well, the scene right here, I'm just standing in amongst the military tanks that are in front of Cairo Museum that are now, there are certainly no soldiers in them. They're just being sat on at the moment by anti-government protesters. But what is happening just here is that every few minutes or so, the anti-government protesters are making what is effectively a citizen's arrest and dragging people off and handing them over to the military who are waiting at the gates of the Cairo Museum. Now, the anti-government protesters are telling me that these people they're handing over are in fact police officers. They're checking their IDs, and I've seen at least 5 of these types of being handed over to the military in those grounds. I'm also seeing a steady stream of injured people. One guy walking past right now with blood pouring down his face. His face is completely red, and he's holding both his hands up in the peace sign as he's walking back. I've seen just in the last 5 minutes at least 20 or 30 people right here moving back injured. I would say I have personally seen at least 100 people being carried off towards Tahrir Square with injuries of some description. The most seriously injured person that I've seen so far was a young boy who could not have been more than eight years old, who was unconscious and being carried on the back of another man, and he was completely unconscious. He was very young, and he was also carted off. I couldn't get a better look to see exactly what his injury was and how serious it was, but he did appear to be unconscious. This flow of injured people just continues coming my way. There's another 3 or 4 guys walking back this way now with blood all over their faces and shirts. There are just a constant flow of this, and that main battle is happening about 100 metres further down towards the museum itself.
Well, the scene seems to be very similar to another one of our correspondents has been describing the violence where she is. Just tell us what's going on where you are.
I'm hearing firing coming from the direction of Tahrir Square, and I can see hundreds of people are running away from that fire. I can't see who's firing. It's a completely chaotic situation, as you can imagine. Lots of people just stamping on top of each other just to try and get away, but they're still throwing rocks. And we just try and give you a sense of where I am. I'm on a street that's parallel to Tahrir Square, and then there's a street that links where I am to Tahrir Square. There was a cordon there for the past 20 minutes or so, and what the pro-Mubarak protesters were trying to do is break through that cordon and go towards the square. They weren't able to do that in the first 20 minutes, but then suddenly they were. They broke through, hundreds of people went through, and then that's when we started hearing the firing. And now everyone is retreating, they're running back, and as you could probably hear, complete mayhem.
And it does sound like that. Well, let's go over to our correspondent who's got an excellent vantage point. Jackie, just give us really the geography of where these clashes are happening in context to Cairo itself as a city.
Yes, I mean, the front line of this confrontation now is in the street below, just next to the Egyptian Museum. You can see the Egyptian Museum complex, this rose-coloured building. And then there is a row of about 3 military vehicles, green trucks, which have been commandeered. Now, first of all, they were used by the pro-Mubarak demonstrators. They were basically using these trucks as a defensive barrier from which they were hurling bricks, hurling stones at the anti-Mubarak demonstrators who were on the other side. But then we saw a reversal. We saw the anti-government demonstrators surging forward. They took control of that line of trucks, and as you saw just back there, there was this gap now where the pro-Mubarak demonstrators have moved forward. Essentially, they were forced to retreat. I mean, these are battle lines that we're looking at on the square, and that does seem to be a key bridgehead that both sides have been fighting over. First, the Mubarak supporters had control of the trucks. They've now been forced back, and it's the anti-government demonstrators who are using those trucks as their defensive barrier. And I'd say you've got a distance of less than 100 meters on that front line. In terms of the geography of where we are, I mean, really, the Tahrir Square is now the epicenter of this struggle for the future direction of Egypt. The square itself, you can still see the banners there, the square that was actually packed tight with demonstrators on Tuesday night. It's now quite thinly, quite sparsely populated because lots of people have pushed forward to the front line. And as Shireen, as our other correspondent was just reporting, many other protesters have also fled from the square. I mean, people have been trying to get away from this firing zone, basically. So now the most dense areas are the area just before the Egyptian Museum, before you reach the square, which is packed with thousands of Mubarak supporters being held back at the moment. And then beyond those green military trucks, you've got the front lines of the anti-government demonstrators. And of course, as we've heard, individual scuffles, clashes breaking out all over this area of central Cairo.
Of course, we can actually hear as well the roar that there is there as well, Jackie. Of course, we'll come back to you in a little while. Let's join Abdul Halim Kandil of the Al Kafaya group. Sir, scenes of, well, clashes between various groups of people, pro-government, anti-government. What's your reaction to what you are hearing and seeing?
There are no pro-Mubarak. They are merely thugs, gangs, and security personnel dressed as civilians. What is happening in Tahrir Square now is a crime perpetrated by Mubarak and his regime. It is another crime perpetrated by him. We cannot see how far his stubbornness will lead the country to. This is another crime, as I said, by the regime, and he must be held accountable for it.
Are you surprised that this has happened?
No, not at all. Simply for the reason that I'm aware of the nature of this regime. It is a murderous regime. More than 100,000 of armed police personnel. The entire police and intelligence are directed against the peaceful demonstrators. Millions and millions of Egyptians came out to the streets to express their voice, and he is adamant to remain clinching the seat of power. However, he and his entire family and supporters must be held accountable and stand trial.
So what are the opposition going to do now? You had a considerable stance in that you would not talk to officials until the president stood down. What do you actually think you're going to do now?
We are very peaceful We are very peaceful opposition. We have many demands. On top of these demands is Mubarak to be toppled, to be stepped down and stand trial. Without this demand materialized, we cannot engage in any dialogue. Any dialogue is conditional. No negotiation until he steps down. No negotiation until the Mubarak and his regime stand trial and be held accountable for all the crimes. Investigations must be initiated. The demonstrators, peaceful, unarmed demonstrators, were attacked by the camels and horses of the police apparatuses. Mubarak cannot step down. He does not want to step down and put an